The Vietnam People's Air Force is the Air Force of Vietnam. It is the successor of the former North Vietnamese Air Force and absorbed the Republic of Vietnam Air Force following the reunification of Vietnam in 1975. The Vietnam People's Air Force is one of three main branches in the Vietnam People's Army, which is a part of the Ministry of Defense. The main mission of the VPAF is the defense of Vietnamese airspace and the provision of air cover for operations of the Vietnam People's Army. History. Beginning 1964, the first aircraft in service for the Vietnamese armed forces were two trainers, a de Havilland Tiger Moth and a Moran Saulnier, which were initially the private property of the Emperor Bao Tai. In 1945, Bao Tai gave the aircraft to the Vietnamese government. Until 1950, even though the Vietnam People's Army had acquired credible offensive capabilities on the ground, it was almost powerless against reconnaissance or attacking operations from the French Expeditionary Air Force. On 9 March 1949, General von Nguyen was authorized to establish the Air Force Research Committee under the General Staff to study ways to deal with the air war. The first Vietnamese service aircraft flight was made by the Tiger Moth on 15 August 1949. A small-scale training was carried out in the following years. Further development of aviation in North Vietnam began in 1956, when a number of trainees were sent to the USSR and China for pilot training. They were organized into two groups, for pilots and mechanics, respectively, and, among others, utilized the Czechoslovak Zlin Z-226 and Aero A-45. The first unit of the VPAF was the No. 919 Transport Regiment, organized on 1 May 1959, with an II, Li-2, Il-14 aircraft, followed by the No. 910 Training Regiment with Yak-18 trainers. In 1963, the Air Force and Air Defense Force were merged into the Air and Air Defense Force. 1964–74, the first North Vietnamese combat plane was a T-28 Trojan trainer, whose pilot defected from the Royal Lao Air Force. It was utilized from early 1964 by the North Vietnamese as a night fighter. The T-28 was the first North Vietnamese aircraft to shoot down a U.S. aircraft, a C-123, on 15 February 1964. The North Vietnamese Air Force received its first jet fighter aircraft, the MiG-17, in February 1964. But they were initially stationed at air bases on mainland China, while their pilots were being trained. On 3 February 1964, the 1st Fighter Regiment No. 921, aka Red Star Squadron, was formed, and on 6 August it arrived from China in North Vietnam with its MiG-17s. On 7 September, the No. 923 Fighter Regiment, aka Yen the Squadron, led by Lt. Col. Nguyen Phuc Trac, was formed. In May 1965, No. 16 Bomber Company was formed with Il-28 twin-engine bombers. Only one Il-28 sortie was flown in 1972 against Royal Laotian forces. The North Vietnamese Air Force's first jet air-to-air engagement with U.S. aircraft was on 3 April 1965. The NVAF claimed the shooting down of two U.S. Navy F-8 Crusader, which was not confirmed by U.S. sources, although they acknowledged having encountered MiGs. Consequently, the 3rd of April became North Vietnamese Air Force Day. On the 4th of April, the VPAF scored the first confirmed victories to be acknowledged by both sides. The U.S. fighter community was shocked when relatively slow, post-Korean era MiG-17 fighters shot down advanced F-105 Thunder Chief fighters bombers attacking the Than Hoa Bridge. The two downed F-105s were carrying their normal heavy bomb load, and were not able to react to their attackers. In 1965, the NVAF were supplied with supersonic MiG-21s by the USSR, which were used for high-speed GCI-controlled hit-and-run intercepts against American air strike groups. The MiG-21 tactics became so effective that by late 1966, an operation was mounted to especially deal with the MiG-21 threat. Led by Colonel Robin Olds on 2 January 1967, Operation Bolo lured MiG-21s into the air, thinking they were intercepting a F-105 strike group, but instead found a sky full of missile-armed F-4 Phantom IIs set for aerial combat. The result was a loss of almost half the inventory of MiG-21 interceptors, at a cost of no U.S. losses. The VPAF stood down for additional training after this setback. Meanwhile, the disappointing performances of U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy airmen, even though flying the contemporary advanced aircraft of those times, combined with a legacy of successes from World War II and the Korean War, resulted in a total revamping of aerial combat training for the USN in 1968. The designs for an entire generation of aircraft with engineering for optimized daylight air-to-air combat against both older, as well as for emerging MiG fighters, were being put to the drawing board. U.S. forces could not consistently track low-flying MiGs on radar, and were hampered by restrictive rules of engagement which required pilots to visually acquire their targets, nullifying much of the advantage of radar-guided missiles, which often proved unreliable when used in combat. The VPAF was a defensive air arm, with the primary mission of defending North Vietnam, and until the last stages of the war, did not conduct air operations into South Vietnam, nor did the NVAF conduct general offensive actions against enemy naval forces off the coast. However, it did conduct limited attacks on the opposing naval vessels, notably damaging the United States destroyer US Higbee in 1972. In a separate incident, MiG-17s that ventured over water were shot down by surface-to-air missiles fired by U.S. warships. The VPAF also conducted an air attack mission against a USAF radar and navigation installation in Laos. The VPAF did not engage all U.S. sorties. Most U.S. aircraft were destroyed by SA-2 surface-to-air missiles or anti-aircraft artillery, and in some cases, even small arms. Typically, VPAF MiGs would not engage unless it was to their advantage. Some of the aerial tactics used were similar to Operation Bolo, which lured the NVAF to the fight. On 24 March 1967, Regiments Nos. 921, 923 and 919 were incorporated into the 371st Air Division, Thang Long. In 1969, No. 925 Fighter Regiment was formed, flying the Shenyang J-6. In 1972, the 4th Fighter Regiment, No. 927, Lam Son, was formed. VPAF flew their interceptors with superb guidance from ground controllers, who positioned the MiGs in perfect ambush battle stations. The MiGs made fast and devastating attacks against U.S. formations from several directions. After shooting down a few American planes and forcing some of the F-105s to drop their bombs prematurely, the MiGs did not wait for retaliation, but disengaged rapidly. This guerrilla warfare in the air proved very successful. In December 1966, the MiG-21 pilots of the 921st FR downed 14 F-105s without any losses. The U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy continued to lay down great expectations on the F-4 Phantom, assuming that the massive arms, the perfect onboard radar, the highest speed and acceleration properties, coupled with the new tactics will provide Phantoms an advantage over the MiGs. But in collisions with lighter VPAF's MiG-21, F-4 began to suffer defeat. From May to December 1966, the U.S. air battles lost 47 aircraft, destroying all of this only 12 enemy's fighters. From April 1965 to November 1968, over North Vietnam was conducted 268 air battles. VPAF claimed shot down 244 U.S. or ARVN's aircraft, and they lost 85 MiGs. in one of their few offensive air attacks by the VPAF during the entire conflict. On 12 January 1968, a four-aircraft formation of Antonov and two biplanes were reported flying towards a secret USAF TACAN and radar site in Laos, guiding American bombers over northern Vietnam. Two aircraft flew onto the strike, while the other two split off. As the two continuing and 2s flew over, their crews dropped 120mm mortar shells as bombs through the aircraft's floor, and also strafed their targets with 57mm rockets from the wing pods. However, as the two aircraft flew back and forth attacking the facility, one aircraft was heavily damaged by ground fire from the facility and crashed. Meanwhile, crew at Lima Site 85 managed to call in a nearby Air America helicopter. A crew member aboard the helicopter armed with an assault rifle fired on the last biplane and caused it to crash. The site was eventually overrun by People's Army of Vietnam commando climbers. In the spring and summer of 1972, to illumine the theater of war, 360 tactical fighters of the U.S. Air Force and 96 Navy fighter, a great number of which were F-4 Phantom of recent modifications, opposed only 71 VPAF's aircraft was a militant. The culmination of the struggle in the air in the spring of 1972 was the 10th of May, when the VPAF's aircraft completed 64 sorties, spending 15 air battles. VPAF claimed 7 F-4s were shot down. Those, in turn, managed to kill 2 MiG-21s, 3 MiG-17s and 1 MiG-19. The 11th of May, 2 MiG-21, who played the role of bait, brought the 4 F-42 circled at low altitude MiG-21. MiGs quickly stormed the Phantoms, and 3 missiles shot down 2 F-4. The 18th of May, Vietnamese aircraft made 26 sorties and spent 8 air combat, which cost the 4 F-4 Phantom. Vietnamese fighters on that day did not suffer losses. The 13th of June, MiG-21 unit intercepted a group of F-4. The second pair of MiGs made a missile attack and was hit by 2 F-4 and did not suffer losses. Over the course of the air war, between the 3rd of April 1965 and the 8th of January 1973, each side would ultimately claim favorable kill ratios. A total of 1972, between American and Vietnamese planes, took 201 air battle. VPAF lost 54 MiGs and they claimed 90 U.S. aircraft were shot down. U.S. Navy ace Randy Cunningham believed that he shot down a MiG-17 piloted by the mythical Nguyen Toon, or Colonel Toom, while flying his F-4 Phantom. However, no research has been able to identify Col. Toom's existence. Cunningham most likely downed a flight leader of the 923rd Regiment. Legend states Col. Toon downed 13 U.S. aircraft during his tenure. Many North Vietnamese pilots were not only skilled but unorthodox, as Cunningham found out after making elementary tactical errors. The resulting dogfight became extended. Cunningham climbed steeply, and the MiG pilots surprised Cunningham by climbing as well. Using his Top Gun training, Cunningham finally forced the MiG out ahead of him and destroyed it. In fact, there wasn't any pilot in VPAF named Nguyen Toon. He was a fictional character of the American pilots, and they often made jokes with the dissertation. As a goodwill of the American pilots, Colonel Toon was a combination of good pilots in Vietnam. Like the solo artist, lonely night bombing in World War II was called Washing Machine Charlie. There were several times during the war that the U.S. bombing restrictions of North Vietnamese airfields were lifted. Many VPAF aircraft were destroyed on the ground, and those that were not were withdrawn to a sanctuary in the northwest of the country or in China. In December 1972, the North Vietnamese air defenses nearly exhausted their supply of surface-to-air missiles trying to down the high-flying B-52 raids over the north. The North Vietnamese air defense network was degraded by electronic countermeasures and other suppression of enemy air defenses measures. though the North Vietnamese forces claim over 81 U.S. aircraft as shot down during Operation Linebacker 2. U.S. sources acknowledge only 27 aircraft lost by the Americans. Within 12 days of the Operation Linebacker 2, during the 8 air battles were shot down 7 U.S. aircraft and 3 Vietnamese MiG-21. After the negotiated end of American involvement in early 1973, the No. 919 Transport Air Group was formed, and equipped with fixed-wing aircraft, as well as helicopters in November. During the 1975 spring offensive, the bombing of Tan Son Nhut Air Base, the only airstrike conducted by the VPAF, occurred on 28 April 1975. Just 2 days before the fall of Saigon. The operation was carried out by the VPAF's Quet Thang Squadron, using captured A-37s aircraft flown by hero pilot Nguyen Thanh Trung, who had bombed the presidential palace in Saigon less than 1 month earlier before defecting to the north. During the Vietnam War, NVAF used the MiG-17F, PF, MiG-19, MiG-21 F-13, PF, PFM and MF fighters. They claimed to have shot down 266 U.S. aircraft, and U.S. claimed to have shot down or destroyed 204 MiGs aircraft and at least 6 and 2s, of which 196 were confirmed with solid evidence. However, VPAF admits only 154 MiGs were lost through all causes, including 131 in air combat. Like that, total kill ratio would be 1.3 to 1 to 2. With the number of losses to MiGs confirmed by US, the kill ratio turned 1.61 against the MiGs, or 1.11, even accepting the VPAF's figure of only 131 in air combat. However, this ratio does not include the number of ARVN's aircraft shot down by VPAF 1975 present. The VPAF did not play a major role during the Ho Chi Minh campaign in 1975. The only sorties flown were conducted by 5 captured VNAF A-37s. SA-2s were transported into South Vietnam to counter possible U.S. military airstrikes. The U.S. could not bring back their air power during the 1975 offensive, which had proven decisive in 1972, and the VNAF did not have the capability to strike targets in the north nor to defend against the onslaught in the south. After the end of the Vietnam War in May 1975, more regiments were formed. No. 935 Fighter Regiment Thong Nai, and No. 937 Fighter Bomber Regiment Hao Giang, followed by No. 918 Transport Regiment Hong Ha, and No. 917 Mixed Transport Regiment Thong Thap were created in July 1975. In September 1975, the 4 newly created regiments were formed into the 370 ND Air Division, Lorelei, and the 372nd Air Division, Hai Van, was formed, including among others the 925th Fighter Regiment. On 31 May 1977, the Vietnam People's Air Force was separated from the Air Defense Force. When South Vietnam was overrun by PAVN forces on 30 April 1975, approximately 877 aircraft were captured by PAVN. Of that number, 41 were F-5s and 95 were A-37s. When Vietnam invaded Cambodia in 1979, former VNAF A-37s flew most of the ground support missions. These aircraft were more suited to the role than the MiGs. Former VNAF F-5s, C-123s, C-130s, and AUH-1s were used by the VPAF for many years after the end of the war. In the years between 1953 and 1991, approximately 700 warplanes, 120 helicopters, and 158 missile complexes have been supplied to North Vietnam by the USSR and PR China. Even today, three-quarters of Vietnamese weaponry has been made in post-Cold War Russia. Today the VPAF is in the midst of modernization. It still operates late-model MiG-21s, Su-22s, aircraft of the Cold War era. However, it has recently been modernizing its air force with models of the Su-27 Air superiority fighter following closer military ties, and an array of arms deals with Russia. To date, Vietnam has ordered and received 12 of these aircraft. In 2004, it also acquired 4 modified variants of the Su-30 Mk2V, newer models of the Su-27. In May 2009, they have inked a deal to procure additional 12 aircraft from the Russian to bolster their aging fleet. The Vietnamese Air Force has also acquired new advanced air defense systems, including two S-300 PMU-1 short-to-high-altitude SAM batteries in a deal worth $300 million with Russia. A twin-engine light transport aircraft of the 918th Transport Regiment crashed into a field on the outskirts of the capital Hanoi on Tuesday morning, the 8th of April 2008 during a training mission, killing 5 Vietnamese military pilots. The plane took off from Gia Lam Airport in Hanoi, northern Vietnam, with 5 officers aboard for a training exercise. It crashed on its way back to the airport. Aerial aces in Vietnam War. Many Vietnamese pilots had notable achievements, and were honored in as aces. Organizational structure. Air Force and Air Defense Divisions. The organizational levels of Vietnam People's Air Force, from highest to lowest are: High Command of Vietnam People's Air Force, Air Division, Air Regiment, Air Flight, Air Section, Air Division and regimental names of the VPAF. Recent base information is from the Vietnamese Wikipedia VPAF article. Bases. Some air bases in the south were built by the French, Japanese *, United States Air Force or United States Navy for South Vietnam. The northern bases were likely built with assistance in, or used by the French, China or Soviet Union during the Vietnam War. Acute P Air Base, Bien Hoa Air Base, Thong Hoi Airport, Ho Lac Air Base, Gia Lam Air Base, ANH Sun Airfield, Tan Son Air Base, Tho Shan Airport, Training School for Vietnam Fighter Pilot, Trong Sa Airfield, Tan Son NHUT Air Base, Yen Bai Air Base, Training School for Vietnam Fighter Pilot, Cam Ranh Airport, opened for commercial flights in 2005. Vung Tau Airfield operates for offshore helicopter services. Sien Tho Airfield, open and upgrade for logistics support air group. Phu Quyen Air Base 921st Fighter Regiment, NHA Trang Air Base. Air Force Museum. There are 2 Air Force museums in Vietnam: Vietnam People's Air Force Museum, Hanoi, and Vietnam People's Air Force Museum, Ho Chi Minh City. Service branches. Ranks. Aircraft. Most of the aircraft were supplied by the Soviet Union, but hundreds were left over by the United States via the Republic of Vietnam, most which are no longer in service. Current inventory. Retired. Some notable combat aircraft that were operated by the Air Force consisted of the MiG-15 UTI, MiG-17F, MiG-23, the American F-5 Tiger II, and the A-37B Dragonfly. Transport aircraft were the C-47 Dakota, C-130 Hercules, and 2 Colt, and the Berryer B-12 amphibious aircraft. Helicopters consisted of the Ka-25 Hormone, MIL-Me-6, MIL-Me-4, and the CH-47H Chinook. Most of these aircraft have now been sold off or scrapped due to loss of parts. Vietnam's rapid economic development is opening the country to foreign investment and has resulted in Hanoi's new acquisition of more modern equipment. The Air Force is deemed efficient, but financial problems mean its improvement programs will be slow at best.